So one of the things that I think is surprising in terms of kind of objections that you find in organizations, and I don't know how many of you, have an organization that fully supports social media, but oftentimes I find, as Paul mentioned, there are executives that think, well, I'm not on Twitter, so no one must be on Twitter, and they just have this wall up, like if I don't do it, then no one must be there. And the truth is, they're just not invited to the party, but there are already 5 million people or 500 million people at that party without them. And you just need to be able to illustrate to them that these conversations are happening. You need to dig the knife in a little by showing them what the competitors are doing on social media sometimes. But prove to them that there's an audience and there are conversations taking place that you can be a part of. And this is just a kind of a quick graphic showing the various types of social media engagement. And I think people forget that you may not be talking just to your customer. Tim said you cannot sell another $100,000 router through Twitter alone, but you may be reaching an audience that is part of that decision-making process or is doing their research on products and services, and you're tipping the scales in the right direction. But you're also talking to members of the media, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit, to industry analysts, to potential employees, to strategic partners. So although I'm very focused on the ROI of social media, it's not just about ROI through sales to a customer. So I won't kind of go over the stats too much, but I think B2B brands often dismiss Facebook too early. And I think what's important to understand about Facebook is it's not about how you personally use Facebook. It's more about what users want in a Facebook experience with your brand. And it's not for every brand in terms of selling product on Facebook. And yes, macaroni and cheese and Coca-Cola and power drinks do fantastically well in these mediums, but so can B2B brands when they're taking the right approach. When you have such a large audience of consumers using this on a daily basis, you definitely want to tap into and be part of the presence of mind that's happening on Facebook, but you want to make sure that you're not trying to force them into an engagement that they're not looking for. It's like if you're at, online for Starbucks and you're like focused on getting your latte and the guy in front of you turns around and tries to sell you insurance. Like, that's not what you're there for. You're there for something else. But if you're able to, chat him up and talk to him, and he happens to mention that he's an insurance person and he gives you his card, and then later you meet him in another medium on their website or on their YouTube page, or have a deeper conversation kind of outside of that context, you can bring in leads and bring in opportunities to your company. LinkedIn, I absolutely agree with what Bob said, the #1 place for lead generation, but I also think it's one of the most underutilized platforms by marketers. And people forget that LinkedIn has these fantastic groups that have preordained themselves in terms of your target audience. So whether or not you're trying to reach medical professionals or IT administrators or someone in the GRC space, these groups have already formed, and you can go there and find this whole pool of your target audience and engage with them. I think one of the hardest parts is when companies try to create their own communities outside of an existing social media platform. And when you do that, you better have something fantastic for them to come to and worthwhile. And you know what? Most of us in the quiet of our office will admit that we probably don't have the greatest thing on earth, and we're not going to pull them away from whatever it is that they're already interested in. But if we can find them in these groups and engage with them in that environment, we're going to reach that target audience. And it's also easier for us oftentimes because we're not the only ones contributing to the conversation. So we're not responsible for 100% of the content, 100% of the moderation, 100% of generating interest in those groups. Twitter, I also think is it's a great medium, but it also can be a very targeted medium. I'll give a couple of examples towards the end of the presentation. It's a little hard to read this slide, but one of the things that the second bar says, is are you likely to recommend a product on Twitter? And people are definitely looking for product recommendations, for advice from colleagues, kind of they're polling the public forum for questions and answers on topics that are relevant to them. They are looking for services, they're looking for products, and if you can answer those questions, you'll be on their short list for consideration.